Captain Hansol Kim felt the weight of his old leather holster against his hip as he pushed through the heavy doors of Graviton's Rest. The moment he stepped inside, the smell hit him first, a mix of ozone from alien breathing apparatus, sweet, chemical vapors from unknown species, and something that reminded him of burnt metal. The bar was massive, stretching out like an aircraft hangar, with ceilings so high it disappeared into smoky darkness above. Nexus Station was the biggest trading post in this part of the galaxy, and Graviton's Rest was where the roughest travelers came to drink, fight, and make deals that would never see official paperwork. Hansol had been warned about this place back on Earth, but his ship needed fuel and his crew needed rest. Sometimes you had to take risks. Behind him, So Young Park tried to walk normally, but Hansol could see her pilot training kicking in. She was already mapping exit routes and calculating distances to cover. Min-Ho Lee, their engineer, kept his hands in his pockets and his head down, but his eyes were moving constantly, taking in every detail of the alien technology around them. Smart kids, both of them. They knew they were walking into a den of predators. The bar itself was a marvel of engineering. Tables floated at different heights to accommodate species of various sizes. Some aliens sat in pools of liquid, others hung from the ceiling, and a few seemed to exist as pure energy contained in glass spheres. Conversations flowed in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal, and electronic static all mixed together. But it was the corner table that caught Hansol's attention immediately. 7 massive reptilian beings sat there, each one built like a small mountain. The Kralik were famous throughout the galaxy as warriors and mercenaries. Their green-scaled skin looked thick enough to stop bullets, and their yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of born killers. Each one carried a plasma rifle that probably cost more than Hansol's entire ship. The biggest Kralik, obviously their leader, had scars running down the left side of his face like someone had tried to peel his skin off with a knife. His plasma rifle was different from the others, older, more battle-worn, with modifications that spoke of years of combat experience. This was Thakmor, a name whispered in spacer bars across 3 sectors. The moment the humans walked in, every Kralik head turned toward them. It was like being noticed by a pack of wolves. Hansol felt his crew tense behind him, but he kept walking toward the bar, acting like he belonged there. That's when Thakmor's gaze dropped to Hansol's hip, where his sidearm rested in its worn leather holster. The weapon looked pathetic compared to the alien technology surrounding them, just a simple chemical projectile gun that humans had been using for centuries. No energy cells, no targeting computers, no fancy modifications, just metal and gunpowder. Thakmor's laugh started low in his throat, like rocks grinding together, then grew louder until it filled the entire bar. Other Kralik joined in, their voices creating a sound like a landslide. The noise was so harsh that several nearby aliens actually covered their hearing organs. "Brothers, look at this," Thakmor called out, his voice carrying easily across the huge space. He spoke in Galactic Standard, the trade language that most species used, but his accent made each word sound threatening. "The baby humans still play with their ancient toys. How adorable." The insult spread through the bar like wildfire. Conversations stopped at dozens of tables as alien eyes turned toward the small group of humans. Some species Hansol recognized. From diplomatic files, the Vorthan looked like living light wrapped in translucent skin, able to manipulate energy with their minds. The Drex were militaristic to their core, every member of their species serving in their war fleets, carrying weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls. Even the peaceful Luminari, who supposedly never fought anyone, were watching with interest. Their crystalline bodies caught the bar's neon lights and threw rainbow patterns on the walls, but their attention was fixed on what they clearly expected to be entertainment at human expense. Hansol could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on him. Some were curious, others amused, but most held the same expression he'd seen in nature documentaries when predators watched wounded prey. They smelled weakness, and in a place like Graviton's Rest, weakness was blood in the water. So Young whispered behind him in Korean, her voice tight with worry. She was asking if they should leave, find another bar, avoid the confrontation that was building like a storm. Minho was probably running calculations in his head, figuring out how long it would take them to reach their ship if things went bad. But Han Sol kept his hand away from his weapon. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to handle bullies was to let them think they had all the power, right up until they discovered they were wrong. The bar held its breath, waiting to see what the humans would do. Thakmor rose from his seat like a mountain coming to life. The Kralik warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his massive frame casting a shadow across half the bar. The plasma rifle in his hands began to glow with a soft blue light, energy coursing through its advanced systems. The weapon itself was a work of art, sleek metal curves embedded with crystals that pulsed with contained power. Han Sol had read about these rifles in military briefings. They cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The weapon could do things that seemed impossible. Its guided plasma bolts could turn corners, following pre-programmed flight paths or chasing heat signatures. The rifle could adjust its power from a gentle stun that would knock someone unconscious to a full power blast that would turn a grown man into atoms. Most terrifying of all, it could penetrate nearly any armor known to galactic civilization. "I propose the proving ritual," Thakmor announced, his voice booming across the suddenly quiet bar. He spread his arms wide, the plasma rifle held casually in one massive clawed hand. "Let us see if your primitive toy can measure against real weaponry." The proving ritual was famous throughout the galaxy. Warriors from different species used it to settle disputes, test their skills, and establish dominance. It was part shooting contest, part honor duel, and part public entertainment. The rules were simple. 2 fighters would face increasingly difficult shooting challenges until one failed or admitted defeat. Han Sol had heard stories about the ritual. Most ended with the loser being carried out on a stretcher, if they were lucky. The unlucky ones were carried out in pieces. The bar's holographic targeting system suddenly came to life. Hidden projectors throughout the massive space began creating targets out of light and force fields. What started as simple glowing discs hanging in the air would gradually become more complex. Moving targets that darted around like angry insects, armored targets that required multiple hits, targets hidden behind obstacles that could only be hit with perfect angle shots. The system was designed to test everything: accuracy, speed, tactical thinking, and the ability to adapt under pressure. It was said that only master warriors could complete all the levels. So Young moved closer to Han Sol, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper in Korean. She was telling him this was a bad idea, that they should walk away, find another bar, avoid this confrontation. Her pilot instincts were screaming danger. She'd seen enough bar fights to know how they usually ended for humans. Minho was doing rapid calculations in his head, probably figuring out their odds of survival. As an engineer, he understood the technical specifications of Kralik plasma. Weapons better than most. The numbers weren't encouraging, but Han Sol was already stepping forward, his weathered face showing no emotion. Years of military service had taught him to keep his feelings hidden, especially when facing an enemy. His voice was steady and calm when he spoke. "I accept." Those 2 words changed everything. The bar erupted in excited chatter as aliens realized they were about to witness something rare, a human stupid enough to challenge a Kralik warrior to single combat. It was like watching a house cat challenge a tiger. The crowd pressed closer, forming a rough circle around the 2 fighters. Aliens floated, crawled, and slithered into better viewing positions. Some species had to adjust their visual organs to see properly in the bar's mixed lighting. Others activated recording devices, knowing this would be something worth sharing across the galactic network. Betting started immediately. Betting started, not on whether the human would lose. That was obvious to everyone present. The real bets were on how long he would last, how badly he would be humiliated, and whether he would survive the experience. The odds were heavily against Han Sol lasting more than 30 seconds. A Vorthan merchant was offering 10-to-1 odds that the human wouldn't hit a single target. A Drex military officer was betting the human's weapon would jam before he could fire his first shot. Even the peaceful Luminari were quietly wagering on how many pieces the human would end up in. The only beings not betting were Han Sol's own crew. So Young and Minho stood at the edge of the crowd, their faces tight with worry. They knew their captain better than these aliens did, but even they weren't sure what he was thinking. Thakmor checked his plasma rifle, running through system diagnostics with practiced efficiency. Energy levels were at maximum, targeting computers were online, guided projectile systems were ready. He had fought in 100 battles across 20 worlds, and his weapon had never failed him. Hansol simply checked that his old pistol was properly seated in its holster. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, and the metal showed scratches and dents from countless missions. Compared to the Kralik's gleaming weapon of destruction, it looked like something from a museum. The holographic targeting system finished its startup sequence, bathing the bar in shifting patterns of colored light. Simple disc-shaped targets began to materialize at various distances and heights. The first challenge was about to begin. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see if the human was brave or just foolish. The first 3 targets materialized in the air like glowing ghosts. Simple. Circular discs that hung motionless at different heights around the bar. One floated near the ceiling, another at chest level, and the third hovered just above the floor. They were bright blue and perfectly still, waiting to be destroyed. Thakmor lifted his plasma rifle with practiced ease. The weapon immediately came alive, its internal systems humming with energy. Tiny lights along the barrel flickered as the targeting computer scanned the room, calculating distances, wind resistance, and optimal firing solutions. Within seconds, red targeting lasers appeared on all 3 discs simultaneously, painting them with crosshairs that tracked their positions. The Kralik warrior didn't even seem to be aiming. He simply squeezed the trigger and held it down. 3 streams of superheated plasma erupted from his rifle, each bolt following a different path through the air. The energy projectiles curved and twisted like living things, guided by the weapon's computer systems. They moved with impossible precision, each one finding its target with mathematical accuracy. The targets exploded into showers of light and dissipated energy. The crowd of aliens murmured their approval, impressed by the display of advanced technology. Several species that had their own military traditions nodded respectfully at the demonstration. Thakmor lowered his rifle and turned toward Hansol with a dismissive gesture. His scarred face showed the kind of arrogant smile that came from knowing you were the best at something. "Your turn, primitive," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Hansol reached for his sidearm with deliberate slowness. The weapon that emerged from his worn leather holster looked like it belonged in a museum. Where Thakmor's rifle was all sleek curves and glowing energy, Hansol's pistol was pure function over form. The metal was scratched and dented from years of use. The grip was worn smooth where countless hands had held it. There were no lights, no targeting systems, no advanced materials. It was a modified .45 caliber pistol, a design that humans had been using for centuries. The basic concept was simple: a spring-loaded mechanism that used chemical explosives to propel a small piece of metal at high speed. No computers, no guided projectiles, no exotic technology, just physics and engineering that any human mechanic could understand and repair. The weapon looked pathetic compared to the alien technology surrounding it. Several aliens in the crowd actually laughed when they saw it. To them, it was like watching someone bring a stone axe to a laser fight. Hansol raised the pistol and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The shots came so fast, they almost sounded like one long explosion. Each bullet found its target with perfect accuracy, and 3 more holographic discs disappeared in flashes of light. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some aliens nodded politely, acknowledging that the human had managed to hit stationary targets, but most weren't impressed. Lucky shots happened all the time. Any warrior worth his salt could hit 3 motionless targets from close range. Viso, real test was coming. The holographic system activated its second phase, and the bar's atmosphere changed immediately. Instead of simple stationary discs, the new targets were alive with movement. Some darted around like angry insects, following unpredictable flight paths. Others moved in slow, lazy circles. A few appeared and disappeared at random intervals, visible for only seconds at a time. But the real challenge was the obstacles. The holographic system had created barriers throughout the space, walls of light that blocked direct shots, floating platforms that provided cover, and narrow passages. that required precise angles to navigate. Thakmor studied the new arrangement with professional interest. His plasma rifle's targeting computer was already calculating trajectories and plotting courses for his guided projectiles. The beauty of his weapon was that it didn't matter where the targets were hiding. His plasma bolts could curve around. Obstacles change direction mid-flight and even reverse course if necessary. He fired a series of controlled bursts, and the crowd watched in amazement as his energy projectiles performed impossible maneuvers. One bolt curved around a barrier, made a 90-degree turn, and struck a moving target that was completely hidden from the shooter's line of sight. Another projectile actually flew backwards before looping around and hitting its mark from behind. The demonstration was flawless. Every target was destroyed with surgical precision, and the crowd erupted in appreciative sounds from dozens of different species. Now it was Han Solo's turn to face the impossible challenge. He studied the arrangement of obstacles and moving targets, his weathered face showing no emotion. His ancient weapon had no targeting computer, no guided projectiles, no ability to change course after firing. What happened next would be talked about in bars across the galaxy for years to come. Instead of trying to replicate the Krallick's high-tech approach, Han Solo did something completely different. He used the obstacles themselves as tools. His first shot ricocheted off a metal wall support, changing direction and striking a target that was hidden behind cover. The second bullet bounced off the ceiling, then off a floating platform, before hitting a moving target that was darting between barriers. The mathematical precision required was staggering. Han Solo had to calculate angles, velocities, and timing in his head, accounting for the behavior of moving targets and the exact positioning of obstacles. Each shot required him to visualize the bullet's path through multiple ricochets before he pulled the trigger, yet he made it look effortless. His shots rang out with mechanical precision, each bullet following a path that seemed impossible but worked perfectly. He was using pure physics and geometry, turning the environment itself into part of his weapon system. A few aliens in the crowd began to take notice. What they were seeing wasn't luck or simple skill. This was something else entirely. The holographic system began its third phase, and immediately everyone in the bar knew this was where warriors separated themselves from pretenders. The new targets weren't just moving or hidden, they were protected. Shimmering energy shields surrounded each target like soap bubbles made of pure force. These weren't decorative light shows. They were military-grade defensive barriers that could stop almost any weapon in the galaxy. The shields flickered and pulsed with contained power, designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks. They worked by detecting incoming energy signatures and creating opposing forces that neutralized the threat. Most importantly, they weren't constant. Each shield had tiny windows of vulnerability that opened and closed in random patterns, lasting only fractions of a second. To make things worse, some targets were now moving behind multiple layers of protection. A warrior would need to time their shot perfectly, hitting the exact moment when all defensive layers aligned to create a clear path. The mathematical complexity was beyond what most organic minds could calculate in real time. Thakmor raised his plasma rifle, and for the first time, Han Solo could see sweat beading on the Krallick's scaled forehead. The weapon had been firing continuously for several minutes, and heat distortion waves were rising from its barrel. The advanced cooling systems were working overtime, but even alien technology had its limits. The targeting computer in Thakmor's rifle was struggling. Its processors were running thousands of calculations per second, trying to predict when the energy shields would drop and how to time the guided plasma bolts for maximum effectiveness. Warning lights flickered along the weapon's display, indicating that the system was approaching its operational limits. Thakmor fired a controlled burst, and his plasma bolts streaked toward their targets. The energy shields reacted immediately, flaring bright as they absorbed and dispersed the incoming attacks. Most of the shots were completely neutralized, their energy scattered harmlessly into the air. Only 2 bolts managed to slip through narrow windows in the defensive barriers, destroying their targets in brilliant flashes. It was an impressive display, but Han Solo could see the toll it was taking. The Krallick's breathing was heavier now, and his rifle was making concerning clicking noises as its internal mechanisms strained under the heat and power drain. Energy cells that had seemed unlimited at the start of the challenge were now showing amber warning indicators. Now it was Han Solo's turn. He studied the arrangement of shielded targets with the same calm expression he'd worn throughout the entire challenge. His ancient pistol showed no signs of strain or overheating. The metal was warm to the touch, but well within normal operating parameters. What happened next changed everything. Han Solo began firing with the same steady rhythm he'd maintained from the beginning. But something was different this time. While Thakmor's plasma bolts had been deflected and scattered by the energy shields, Han Solo's bullets punched straight through them like they weren't even there. The shields flared and sparked as the solid projectiles passed through their energy fields, but they couldn't stop them. The defensive systems had been designed to counter energy weapons, lasers, plasma bolts, particle beams, and other high-tech armaments. They worked by analyzing incoming energy signatures and creating opposing forces to neutralize them. But Han Solo's bullets weren't energy. They were simple pieces of metal traveling at supersonic speed, propelled by nothing more exotic than controlled chemical explosions. The shields had no protocols for dealing with kinetic projectiles. It was like trying to stop a thrown rock. With a system designed to block radio waves, target after target exploded as Han Solo's bullets found their marks with mechanical precision. He didn't need to wait for the shields to drop or time his shots to hit narrow windows of opportunity. His projectiles simply ignored the defenses entirely, but the real revelation was yet to come. A Vorthan diplomat near the bar had been monitoring the challenge with sophisticated scanning equipment, the kind used in formal military assessments. His crystalline features suddenly shifted to an expression that could only be described as shock. "Impossible," he whispered to his companion, his voice barely audible above the crowd noise. His scanning equipment showed something that defied belief. Every time Thakmor fired his plasma rifle, the sensors lit up like a festival display. Energy. Signatures, electromagnetic emissions, quantum disturbances, heat blooms. The alien weapon announced its presence to every detector within miles. But when Han Solo fired his pistol, the sensors showed nothing. No energy signature, no electromagnetic pulse, no quantum disruption, no detectable emissions of any kind. To the galaxy's most sophisticated detection systems, each shot was completely invisible until the moment it struck its target. The implications hit the watching aliens like a physical blow. Modern warfare depended on sensors and detection systems. Ships tracked incoming missiles with radar and energy sensors. Personal combat armor used threat detection systems to identify and counter incoming attacks. Entire battle strategies were built around the ability to see your enemy's weapons coming, but Han Solo's weapon was invisible to all of it. Each bullet was a ghost that couldn't be detected, tracked, or intercepted until it was too late. How do you defend against something you cannot detect? The Vorthan diplomat whispered to his companion, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and admiration. The question rippled through the crowd as aliens with translation devices shared the revelation with their companions. Species that had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves united in a moment of profound realization. The crowd was no longer laughing. They weren't even making sound. The bar had fallen into a silence so complete that Han Solo's next gunshot seemed to echo forever. For the first time in galactic history, an entire room full of advanced alien civilizations was forced to confront a terrifying truth. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon was the one that looked the most primitive. The holographic system's final challenge materialized around them like a three-dimensional puzzle, designed by a madman. This wasn't just about shooting targets anymore. It was about solving an impossible equation while under extreme pressure. The targets moved in complex patterns that required split-second timing to intercept. Some could only be hit after bouncing, shots off multiple surfaces in precise sequences. Others demanded sustained rapid fire to break through layered defenses. The whole arrangement looked like something from a military academy's most advanced training program, the kind of test that separated elite warriors from everyone else. Even experienced soldiers would struggle with this level of complexity. Thakmor raised his plasma rifle one final time, his massive hands gripping the weapon with renewed determination. Despite everything that had happened, he was still confident in his abilities. He was a veteran of countless battles, and his rifle was a masterpiece of galactic engineering. Surely advanced technology would triumph over primitive human tools when pushed to the absolute limit. The Kralik warrior lined up his first shot, his targeting computer working frantically to calculate the complex trajectory needed to reach a target hidden behind multiple barriers. The rifle's energy cells were running low, and heat warnings flashed across his weapon's display, but he ignored them. This was his moment to prove that experience and superior technology could overcome any challenge. He pulled the trigger. The first shot flew perfectly, his guided plasma bolt curving around obstacles and striking its target with devastating accuracy. The crowd murmured approval, hoping to see their expectations confirmed. The second shot followed immediately, another impossible trajectory that showcased the full capabilities of Kralik military technology. The plasma bolt twisted through the air like a living thing, navigating around barriers that would have stopped any conventional weapon. Then, Thakmor fired his third shot. The plasma rifle made a sound like tearing metal, followed by a high-pitched whine that made several aliens cover their hearing organs. Warning lights exploded across the weapon's display in angry red patterns. The barrel began glowing cherry red as internal cooling systems finally gave up their fight against the accumulated heat. The sophisticated rifle shut down completely. Thakmor stared at his weapon in complete disbelief. The targeting computer had gone dark. The energy cells showed critical failure warnings. The barrel was so hot it was actually starting to warp. His masterpiece of alien engineering had been reduced to an expensive piece of scrap metal. Meanwhile, Han Solo continued, firing with the same mechanical precision he'd shown from the very beginning. His ancient pistol showed no signs of distress, no warnings, no overheating problems. The chemical propellant system that humans had perfected over centuries just kept working, shot after shot, with boring reliability. What followed was a display that would become legend throughout Nexus Station and beyond. Han Solo began systematically destroying the remaining targets using ricochet shots that defied belief. He bounced bullets off the ceiling, then off a wall support, then off another target, creating chain reactions that cleared multiple objectives with single shots. The mathematical precision required was beyond what most organic minds could calculate, yet he made it look as natural as breathing. One shot bounced off 4 different surfaces before striking a target that was hidden behind 3 layers of barriers. Another bullet actually curved around a cylindrical obstacle by following the surface geometry, something that should have been impossible for an unguided projectile. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Han Solo turned the environment itself into part of his weapon system. Every surface became a potential ricochet point. Every obstacle became a tool to redirect his shots toward their intended marks. But the final demonstration was what transformed this from impressive to absolutely devastating. Han Solo turned his attention to Thakmor's disabled plasma rifle. The first shot struck a non-critical external component, a decorative housing that shattered into pieces. The Kralik warrior jerked in surprise, but realized the human hadn't been aiming at him. The second shot took out the targeting computer's external sensor array. The third destroyed the energy cell housing. Shot after shot, Han Solo systematically dismantled the plasma rifle component by component. He used ricochet angles that Thakmor couldn't predict or counter, striking the weapon from directions that seemed impossible. Each bullet found its mark with surgical precision, destroying specific parts without harming the warrior holding the gun. It was the ultimate humiliation. Han Solo wasn't just winning the challenge, he was demonstrating complete mastery over both his own weapon and his opponent's. He could have killed Thakmor at any moment, but instead chose to methodically destroy the Kralik's most prized possession while keeping him completely safe. The bar fell into absolute silence. Even the background noise of alien conversations and mechanical systems seemed to stop. Every being in the establishment was focused on the impossible display of skill they were witnessing. Thakmor looked down at what remained of his plasma rifle. Twisted metal and shattered components that had once been worth more than most starships. Then he looked at Han Solo, who stood calmly with his smoking pistol, showing no signs of stress or exhaustion. Slowly, with great dignity, the proud Kralik warrior nodded in acknowledgement. When he spoke, his voice carried no anger or resentment, only respect. "I underestimated you," he said simply, his words carrying clearly through the silent bar. "Your weapon may be primitive, but in skilled hands." He gestured at the destroyed targets and his ruined rifle. "Perhaps there is wisdom in simplicity." Hansol holstered his sidearm with practiced ease and walked to the bar. His voice was calm and friendly when he addressed the stunned crowd. "Drinks for everyone," he announced in Galactic standard. "I'm buying." As the crowd slowly began to disperse, conversations started up again, but they were different now. Alien species throughout the bar found themselves quietly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the galaxy. The humans had done something remarkable. They had weaponized simplicity itself. While other species pursued increasingly complex technology, humans had perfected tools that were reliable, undetectable, and devastatingly effective when wielded with proper skill and experience. So Young approached her captain, speaking quietly, in Korean so the aliens couldn't understand. She told him that she didn't think anyone would underestimate them again. Hansol smiled as he accepted his drink from the bartender. That was the point. The lesson had been taught, and it would spread. Throughout the galaxy, humanity might be new to the galactic community, but they were far from helpless.